Today, humans have become incredibly advanced. We can travel into space and observe objects millions of kilometers away while sitting in our homes. Science has helped us understand our own existence, but have you ever wondered how life began on the Earth where we were born? And how many different species have evolved and disappeared throughout Earth's history? To find the answers to these questions, we need to travel back in time. Around 4.5 billion years ago. At that time, Earth looked nothing like it does today. It was just a giant ball of fire. There was no water, no atmosphere suitable for life, and not a single living organism. Small and large space rocks were constantly crashing into the young Earth. This intense bombardment continued for millions of years and slowly shaped our planet. Even after Earth became a proper planet, its temperature was still far too hot for life to exist. Around 3.9 billion years ago, Earth faced another period of massive asteroid impacts known as the Late Heavy Bombardment. These asteroids brought with them ice crystals and important gases. Over time, this water formed Earth's first oceans, but our planet was still lifeless. The atmosphere was filled with poisonous gases, and the conditions needed for life had not yet developed. Around 3.8 billion years ago, another wave of asteroids struck Earth. This time, they carried something even more important: carbon, amino acids, proteins, and essential minerals. Deep in the oceans, where sunlight could not reach, hot hydrothermal vents and chemical reactions created the perfect environment for something extraordinary to happen. This was where the first chapter of life began. Simple chemical reactions eventually gave birth to the first single-celled bacteria. These tiny organisms multiplied rapidly, and soon the oceans were filled with microscopic life. Over time, these bacteria form rock-like structures called stromatolites. They use sunlight to make food through a process we now know as photosynthesis. And during this process, they released a gas that would completely change Earth's future. That gas was oxygen. For nearly 2 billion years, oxygen levels in Earth's atmosphere continued to rise, making it possible for more complex forms of life to evolve. Around 1.5 billion years ago, there were still no animals or plants on Earth. The planet was made up of small pieces of land floating in vast oceans. Then, deep inside the Earth, powerful forces moved the tectonic plates, causing these land masses to collide and form a giant supercontinent called Rodinia. But Earth's appearance was about to change once again. Around 750 million years ago, Rodinia began to break apart. Massive volcanic eruptions released huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Then, as the climate changed, Earth's temperature dropped dramatically. For the first time in history, our planet entered a massive ice age. Much of the Earth became covered in ice. But millions of years later, the ice melted and life got a second chance. Around 540 million years ago, life in the oceans exploded into many new forms. Strange and fascinating creatures appeared in the seas. Among them was a small animal called Pikaia. It was only about 5 centimeters long, but it had something incredibly important: a primitive backbone. This tiny creature would eventually become the ancestor of all vertebrate animals, including us. Around 460 million years ago, a protective layer called the ozone layer formed around Earth. For the first time, life could safely move onto land. Small plants began growing on the surface. Then, a fish called Tiktaalik took one of the most important steps in the history of life. It slowly began adapting to life outside the water. Over millions of years, these creatures evolved into animals known as tetrapods, the first vertebrates capable of living on land. These ancient animals would eventually give rise to dinosaurs, birds, mammals, and finally humans. Around 200 million years ago, Earth once again became green and full of life. New species evolved and spread across the planet. Among them were the creatures that would dominate Earth for millions of years: the dinosaurs. Some were peaceful plant eaters, while others were powerful predators. For nearly 165 million years, dinosaurs ruled the Earth. But then, what happened that caused these mighty creatures to disappear forever? And after their extinction, how did humans finally appear on this planet? We will uncover that story in the next episode.